how to be happier. Coming from the happiest man on the planet, me. All right, here you go. You ready? First, stop being negative. Stop thinking negative thoughts. Completely eradicate that. You need to be happier. You need to think happy thoughts. Wash yourself in light. Come on, why aren't you doing that? Come on. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you doing that? You could be so much happier than you are right now. Why are you not letting yourself be that way? You ever thought like that? You ever read books or heard people that just bathe themselves in the holiest of light, and you're like, that just doesn't feel real, right? And I think that creates a division. Actually, I have a strong feeling, like, coming from someone that is very sensitive. Like, I was very sensitive growing up, and I've had to deal with my feelings my whole life, which is actually one of the big reasons why I'm so strong into art. So I've gone through many different kinds of thought processes trying to figure out what works best for me. And that one was always a failure. And I'll tell you why. It's because I do feel other things. I do feel emptiness. I do feel sadness at times. I feel anger. I feel rage. I also feel beauty. I feel happiness. I feel laughter. And I feel all that. So when I really thought about it, my goal was never really to be happy. It was to be a human being, to be an honest to God human being with all my faults and being okay with that. You know, in our society, we want everything to be perfect. Like, we have these perfect people and we have role models which they can't make any mistakes or otherwise they're trash. And we have this huge ideal of happiness and goodness to the point where we're no longer being human beings to one another and to ourselves. We're not allowing ourselves to really feel it. And I feel like one of the biggest challenges of happiness is this barrier that we've created because of that. I don't think you can control your feelings. You can control your environment, you can control your logic. So if you do feel anger, if you do feel stressed, you can de-stress, right? You can do things to bathe yourself into white light, and that's fine. I am not against that. But my whole thing is there's a reason why it existed in the first place. So wouldn't you want to know why you created these feelings in the first place, or where it came from, or where it originated from? So not only, you won't look at it because you need to change it, right? You don't necessarily need to change it. You just need to understand it, because in my perspective, in my world, I found that some of my greatest strengths are my biggest weaknesses. They're the same thing. So if I'm fighting my weaknesses, so for instance, let me give you an example. I'm very laser focused, right? Very laser focused. I can get a lot done. I can be innovative. I can create all these great ideas. But at the same time, I can be so scatterbrained. Now, if I get mad at myself because I forget, like, where my keys are, or I lose my wallet. I have a special system just so I don't forget my wallet. Or even when I'm teaching, I forget names of techniques because I've got so much running in my brain. And in the old days, I used to be really hard on myself about that. But it's now just the realization that that's part of who I am. That's part of the coin, you know? It's two sides of the same coin. And so in my opinion, it's like I try to put my strengths in the light as much as possible, but once in a while, tails flips up. And am I going to be hard on myself about that? Only if I want to get rid of my strengths. I mean, to me, that's what I think. I think, okay, and I'm not talking about the habits or how things express, but most of the feelings inside come from strengths and weaknesses both combined. So it may be helpful to see, and I'll give you an example. I hate radishes, right? I hate radishes. If I don't like radishes, I won't eat them. Ploop, gone, right? You get something out of things that you don't like about yourself. You get something out of it because, just like a radish, to me, if I don't like it, I'll just throw it out. And if you don't like something, you'll throw it out unless it's tied, unless it's connected to some coin. There's some positive that comes out of it, whether it's the flip side of when it works or something else. There's a flip side. There's something that you get out of that. And in my opinion, true change doesn't come from just bathing yourself in light and forgetting why these things exist, but rather understanding what that is. What does your coin look like? Why do you have these two sides, and how are you feeding it? To me, that is understanding yourself. To me, trumps ever being happy. Again, it's better to be an honest to God human being than it is to be this happy, omniscient, there's a lot of people that are in love with looking like they have their life in control, but they don't, or they limit their experiences so they don't have to deal with things because they're not actually equipped to be able to deal with the hard stuff. And in that way, they either run away from it with philosophy or other things. This also is with failure as well. If you think about failure, I'll give you an example. Your perspective is a lot of things, correct? And we have this flip side of the same coin, which is something that you should look at. Let's put that off to the side for a second. I have this great analogy that I'd like to help you with. And that is, if you were walking down the street and a car was zipped right by and almost hit you, some of you would turn that into a bad day and say, you almost got killed today. Others would look at that same event and say, man, I was so lucky. I could have gotten it, but I did good. And in the end, you're going to either feel gratitude or anger or something else towards the situation. You're going to feel something. Yet everyone is correct. No matter what they thought, there's a certain correctness about it. But the perspective that they held is going to determine how they felt about it, as well as anything that accumulates on top of that. If I were to think about our responsibilities to ourselves, it would be understanding the coin of where our strengths and our weaknesses are combined, so we can just accept it, and we can accept who we are and just be okay with things. And then the other one would be there's a perspective that I feel like we have to take responsibility for. And if we don't take responsibility of our perspective, what we're usually doing is taking logic to feed our emotions. And does that work or doesn't that work? Well, I mean, here's the thing, like with your emotions, say you feel angry, right? I'll give you an example. If you feel angry, usually the logic that you're looking for is just to justify why you should feel angry. For instance, whether you like or hate Trump, it doesn't matter. But the moment Trump says something, regardless of if it's right or wrong, you'll probably already have an opinion about it beforehand. And because of that, you've already made it a judgment, regardless if that truth could be helpful or not to you. And in that same way, we have to be able to have control over that, because it just blinds us and makes us unable to see how we ourselves could improve ourselves. I feel like everyone has something to teach us. Some people teach us what to do. Some people teach us what not to do. And whatever it is, we use that and we apply it to ourselves. In the end goal, I think that the most important thing is that everyone we meet and everything we do comes back to ourselves. That we're able to take all this information and figure out, what does that make me feel because of this person? And then you'll realize most of the things that make you feel comes from past experiences that you've had. And are they healthy or are they not healthy? Well, that's a whole other ballpark. But in terms of trying to be happy, I think it's important just to look at all these things. Just to have, I don't know if that's called emotional intelligence, I don't know what it is, but just to look at when something hits you, bam! You know, if I just walked up and punched you in the face right now, you would immediately know, like, you would feel it, you would know it. But for some reason with emotions, we don't even know who's punching us. It's some past experience usually, some past thought, some past expectation, or we had an assumption about something, and if it's correct, that's what's punching us in the face. Yes, the situation might be punching us in the face, but mostly it's our assumption or expectation about something that's hitting us. For instance, a lot of you guys thought that Corona, like, who would have thought that we would be stuck at home? And the level of happiness or ability to like live our lives is, here is how reality is, and here is what we wanted. The division between these two is going to be the amount of suffering that happens. If you wanted something different, oh, but I wanted this to happen, but this is what happened. The more you looked at this, but this should have happened, the more suffering you create in the middle. The longer this gets, the more that you hurt yourself. So when I say our responsibility to ourselves, I'm talking about the fact that when we have this feeling and they get hurt, then our logic tries to justify so we can keep staring at this. You know, we keep looking, oh my gosh, but what about your bills? What about your finances? What about this? What about that? But these questions that are coming in your mind are all to support the same thing, which is basically that you feel hurt by it, and you want to, like, your brain just tries to conjure up reasons to feel more hurt so it can justify that it needs to stay in this spot here, what you wanted, instead of what is actually happening. Is this happiness? I don't know. I think it's the land of going with the flow, though. The ability to go with the flow is the ability to have that discipline to stop your assumptions. You can't stop your feelings. Allow yourself to feel it, but stop the assumptions that say, what about this? What about that? And look and say, what can I do now? What is the reality of things? How can I move through this now? And in my opinion, to me, that's the ultimate way of moving through life, is just to let go of what you think should have happened and to keep following what actually is happening whenever things don't go right. Allow yourself to mourn. That's fine. Allow yourself to feel it. But if you let your thoughts build a fortress around why it needs to be this way when it's really not, that's going to be the level that you're going to be stuck. And you either have to hide from the reality of things and you have to distract yourself from seeing it, or you're going to have to eventually break all those walls down so you can accept where things are. Which gets me to the internet and a lot of other things, because I've noticed that there's a lot of people that are neurotic online now, and there's a lot of people that are fantastic. You really get to see the nature of people when things go crazy. And a lot of times it's like I feel bad for the people that are struggling, I mean, it's been rough for everyone, but there's a lot of blindness happening because of this too, because people of what they want and what's really happening, and they're just so focused on building that fortress, they're not actually looking at the realities of things, and that's causing more harm than good. And in my life, I've rarely ever seen it where it worked in the favor by holding on to what we wanted instead of what's really happening. That's not to say that you can't have a dream, and if it doesn't work, that you don't keep working towards it, and have that. But the ability to have, I'm kind of an optorealist. I believe in optimism, but also being very realistic in it. I feel like you should take steps forward exactly where. So if I'm here, I'm looking at the reality, but I'm also looking for how can I pave that way over to this spot, instead of looking at this spot and say, how can I just pull it over it into here? And if it doesn't work, then no, nothing's happening. Instead, I'm trying to figure out how I can take steps towards the dream. And it's a slower process for sure. But I also, again, to me, I think it feels a little bit more real. And I think the big problem is we think that logic can solve things. And as we can see, it clearly doesn't. You go on the internet, you could have the best logic of your life, right? And you could be completely true, but people still won't believe you. I think this is really important to understand, because I think if we just understood this, we would probably have a lot less internet fights. And that is simply that I think that humans are emotional beings first. First, we feel the emotions, and then we use our logic to justify why we feel this. So you can have all the perfect logic in the world, but really if someone's feelings are hurt or they're upset about something, they're not going to listen to you, even because by changing their logic, it would disregard their feelings. So when you address people, sometimes the best thing you can do is not even try to fight them, but just listen to them. Just give them a little bit. Just listen to them. You don't have to agree. Empathy is not about agreeing with a person, but it's just about listening from their perspective. Because, again, I feel like humans are rarely heard these days because we're all trying to be perfect. We're all trying to be too perfect, in my opinion, and we should be flawed, messed up little monkeys that we are. I think we would have a more perfect world if we just saw each other as flawed a little bit, with quirks. The race for perfection and all that stuff just clouds our view, and it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So everyone's hiding things, and that's a whole nother story. I'm going all over the place with this. But I guess there's a few things that I wanted to talk about mostly, which is the effort to be happy is likely based on just how you are able to perceive things, like the two sides of the coin. If you see your strengths tied to your weaknesses, you shouldn't be so hard on yourself. If you're able to discipline, not necessarily your feelings, let your feelings go. Like if you feel mad, that's okay. Honor that. You should honor that. You should spin like crazy and get out those feelings, but you don't have to honor the logic that it supports. You don't, because the logic is what's killing you. It's the logic, your overthinking is what's throwing you into circles. And the reason for that is it's just trying to support your feelings. Your feelings are the ones that's guiding it, and all the little logic's trying to build a fortress around it. You got to break that fortress down. Let yourself feel things. Let yourself be vulnerable. And it's not easy. It's not easy, especially in this world, like I said, because we've got a lot of people trying to be perfect. In the end, I think that perspective is, while we can't control our feelings, we can control the logic that supports it, and that can slowly guide us into the right path. So, for instance, if you do feel a certain way, just question it. Just question. Allow yourself to question things. I have friends that don't always understand this, but I question my thoughts all the time. So when I question my friends, even though they're passionate, they think that I'm attacking them. But the truth is I just want to understand. Like, you should have a good, you should be able to fortify these thoughts. And if you can't, you should be okay with swiping it away. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck into what you think things should be instead of where things actually are. The last thing I want to talk about is something that I do to help myself be happy. This is a great example because it's a form of meditation. I don't know what it's called, and I just made it up, but I'm positive it exists out there. But I do meditate. And the way that I meditate is fairly different than the way most people meditate. Growing up, I used to hold a candle in front of me and just like stare past the candle and let myself feel like nothingness. And I think that's another great way to do it too. Just try to tap into the absolute. But subjectively, we are loaded with assumptions, expectations, feelings, needs, all these things, and it creates this great big ball. So as we experience life, we are walking around with blinders because our world, our experiences, we're kind of, I don't want to say a victim, but we're a victim to our experiences and what we've gone through if we're not able to escape that. So my meditation that I would like to invite you to try, I would call it a train wreck. And basically, I'll sit down and I will close my eyes and I will imagine that everyone I love has died. I will imagine that everything that I care about is gone, that I'm homeless. And I'll even have dreams about it, and they're so intense. I'm homeless. No one listens to me. I reach out. No one. There's no one to help me. Maybe I'm dying even. Maybe my life is almost over. My son is gone. My father's gone. My family doesn't care about me. I have got no friends. And I sit there and I just sit with the feelings that I would have, because these are all my attachments in life. These are the things that keep my life with passion. And the one thing that you may realize is humans are very adaptable, but because we're able to adapt, we forget all the things we have. We forget all the things we have. So as I go through these motions, I let myself truly feel what it's like to have nothing. And it is a train wreck. If you do it right, it is very difficult. I mean, if you allow yourself to really let yourself believe that everyone is gone, it is a train wreck. It is hard. It's not easy. And once you come out, though, you're going to see things a little bit differently. And I think you're going to feel a little more gratitude for things that you may have completely missed, So for me, creating a virtual train wreck allows me to just reset to zero and remember I'm creating this world where I keep running and running and running, but I have to make sure that I see that where am I in no motion? If there was no motion at all, where am I just at ground zero? And then appreciate all that I actually really have. You don't force yourself to appreciate it. I think it just comes naturally by removing yourself from all of these things, And we don't want to have, and I feel like we experience this, but it's too late. It's usually when someone dies or when something tragic really happens. So this meditation for me is a way to reconnect with myself and my feelings and with everyone else just by simply going into it and letting myself go through it. So the secret to being happier, in my opinion, is to let yourself go into your darkness, go into the hard stuff, but not to judge and not to make it worse and not to use your logic to justify your darkness either, because that's a whole nother ballpark. But just to go in it, to understand your coin and to understand you not in motion, and also to realize just how the mind wants to fortify all its logic around your feelings and your assumptions about things. Erase all of that. Be a clean slate. Just like Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee has tons of sayings about being just clear, letting your mind just formless and shapeless. And in that, I think you can find something that's truly honest. Now, keep in mind that most people don't want to deal with those train wrecks. Most people are clinging on hard. And the harder they cling, it's usually a lot harder for things to be clearer, for there to be more sense of gratitude. So just try to honor and respect the fact that when people have these arguments online, or when you're arguing with yourself, that there are usually bigger things that we've taken for granted. And I think happiness is, again, not about being happier, but just about being human and letting you feel the whole range, the whole scope of being a human being. And in terms of spinning, I feel it's the same way. Your view of failure is going to determine how far you get. How do you see failure? You know, your view of failure could be based on your childhood. So spinning could go way back. It could be based on your self-esteem. I mean, we've talked about that before in previous videos. It could be based on a lot of things. So all of a sudden, your view of failure in spinning can help you with your whole life, because if you're able to see failure as something that you pick up, you learn, you move on and grow, not just to know it, but to truly feel that, then the way that you'll approach life will change with that. And these kinds of realizations, in my opinion, require train wrecks. It does not require washing yourself in light, but letting yourself go through the things that you have been scared to do. So do it, be brave, and when you see someone post about something brave that they did emotionally, more than their haircut, more than their new style of clothes or anything like that, those are all physical, and we'll get older, and that's fantastic. But these are the things that change us permanently. These are the things, I think, that make for a wonderful human being. So that is my spiel. I hope this helps. If not, just keep spinning. And, this is just an extra video they're going to make. I'll make more videos, again, for more tutorials, more live streams next week. But I just really wanted to get this out and try it out, because I did have some recommendations, some requests, I should say. And happiness to me is a huge one. There's so many facets of it. I probably went over a lot of it very quickly, but just take some of it, take whatever works for you, and move forward from there. The rest doesn't matter anyways. All right, take care.